welcome to another INB382 demonstration video. Now this one is with a silhouette edge or outline shader. So as we see here, I've got the cell shaded teapot as per the previous video, but you'll note the edges look slightly different. The reason is because we're using the silhouette edge technique, whereby we are setting up the using cull facing so that we first do two passes. We render the back in black at a larger size, and we end up with this nice black background, which is slightly larger, so it pokes through the geometry. We then render the front over the top of that in our cell shaded approach, and lo and behold, we end up with this sort of Jim Dandy looking teapot. What's problematic about it though, of course, this is geometry. So as we can see there, we get a few oddities occur. One of the major ones being, if we say look at the top of the teapot here, because it's extruded, the geometry just gets amplified out, and that means we don't get correct creation of edges, and they can become non-continuous around the highly convex points on the geometry. So this is something to consider. It's a nice cheap method, and it just requires drawing all the faces, half the faces in the back in black, slightly larger. But I guess it's less costly maybe than using post-processing. It'd be interesting to do a full comparison, but as you can see, we end up with a lot of geometric problems here around the lip of the spout. So moving into the code, because we are software engineers after all. Alright, so it's very much the cell shaded, sort of the toon shaded shader. However, a couple of key differences. There are two passes. The first pass is the one with this edge generation vertex shader. We note here as well, we are culling the front. So on the first pass through, we're killing off all the front-facing polygons and only letting the back-facing polygons through. So this means we're just rendering the back into the frame buffer. So that means that all we have to do, again, it's very simple, is take the positions of the vertices and increment them along the surface normal by some scale. So I've got an edge factor here which I set to 0.02. That's fine, but you've got to discover that. You can put some code in there to figure out the window size and scale it appropriately, whatever. I've just set it here to a factor. And that extruded position is then transformed as per normal by the MVP matrix and then passed out as the actual position. And then when we get to the pixel shader, it's just a pass-through black shader. So this is how we end up with the back faces being spat out as black edges. And then because they're larger, they're scaled by this edge factor, then they poke through. Even if they're behind the other geometry, they start to poke through. You can see even along the lid, it's poking through the front there because it's slightly larger and therefore gets rendered. It survives the Z-buffer test. And so once you've done the background, you do the front. And so you invert it. You cull the back and only render the front. And you render the front at the normal size. And in this case, it's just the toon shader, but it hasn't got an edge factor. So as you can see here, the final color that comes out is the diffuse plus the specular. So that means that this second pass can be anything. You want to highlight an object and just put a halo around it or something. It does not have to be black. You could put a pass-through shader in red. So let's just play around with this. Let's make it a red outline, and let's make it a massive. Let's sort of make it 0.09. So it's going to be quite a large edge in red. And if we go back to the shader here, look at it. It's got a big halo around it. Might be an idea if you want to highlight objects or make them appear a little otherworldly. Again, these are, it's a simple approach, but it can be quite useful, especially if the geometry you're trying to highlight is not particularly complex. You don't get weirdness occurring like you see around the spout here. but it may be useful as a cheap way to highlight objects that are targets in your game or something like that, without having to do fancy post-processing. So again, you can play around with this, but this is a great way to put a silhouette edge or a halo around your objects for edge emphasis within whatever application you desire. Okay, so that's the end of the video. Thanks very much for watching.